Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. We are getting into the more... I got to get readjusted here. You know what?
Your tie's crooked, too.
What? Oh, well...
Makes your belly look big.
Hey. Well, I appreciate that. So... Ted Cruz.
We should spend the commercial adjusting everything so that when we come back on.
See, because the thing is, I kept like sliding down and slumping over, and I'm trying not to do that.
Slouching.
It's hard not to do that in the way that I got this thing configured. So this is very interesting. I'm glad you're sticking with us. Ted Cruz has virtually caught Donald J. Trump in the polls, at least in Iowa. I think the last one that I saw, I think Quinnipiac released one that had Trump at 25 and Cruz at 23. It was one of those major ones.
Well, I think it was the QPAC one.
I think it was, as Ben Carson fades. And this is how interesting this Republican thing has been. But you and I predicted something similar. We just picked the wrong guy. We said that as Trump faded, Cruz would be the beneficiary, and it appears that we were right about who would be the beneficiary, but it was Ben Carson, which shouldn't be surprising because he's been absolutely pounded for...
Oh, yeah, several hit pieces.
Foreign
policy was really a big one.
Well, for being completely unprepared for prime time, it sounds like.
Yeah, I would, and I like Ben Carson.
He's a nice guy.
He's got a great crew in Iowa. But yeah, I'm going to have to say, the people around him should have prepared him for foreign policy. Honest to goodness, all you'd have to do is spend 2 hours with me, and I would tell him everything he would need to know to answer any question about foreign policy. For crying out loud, it's all they do.
It sounds like that's what they tried to do, and it wasn't sinking in. And and some of that stuff, if you're not into it, I have this problem with certain areas of practice. I know that you do too. Certain areas of your practice that you do every once in a while, you don't do them all the time because they just don't sink in, and you just don't like doing them. And I think that might have been part of it. But he seems like a nice guy, and he's fading out as he's been kind of. I don't want to. The word exposed came to the front of my mouth. That's not. I don't mean that he was lying or anything like that. It just that he was a little bit unprepared, and he's not a Donald Trump who, aside from being completely a media veteran, is a guy who just doubles down. You can't catch him. He refuses to be caught out, and he refuses to be shamed. Even Carly Fiorina has dropped precipitously and had to walk back. But finally walked back that business with the Planned Parenthood video eventually, and got pilloried for it. Donald Trump doesn't have to do that, and so he's stayed fairly consistent. Ted Cruz picking up the scraps because Ted Cruz is trying to consolidate his power on the far right, or at least the hardline Christian right. And here's the two things that I want to get your take on, because they seem fairly familiar from when Barack Obama was running back in 2007. Ted Cruz, along with a couple other of the candidates, a few weeks ago, I can't remember, I think it was maybe the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, went to a rally where there was a minister giving a pretty impassioned speech about how the only just biblical punishment for homosexuality was capital punishment. That he was saying that the Bible is very clear that homosexuals need to be killed, that they need to be gathered, rounded up, and executed. But he wasn't calling for it. He wasn't calling for the federal government to do it now. Not right then, because he said, should I do this right, or should we do this right now? No, because he wanted to give them a chance to repent and to... this is my own words, straighten out, if you will. And he's since endorsed Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz has celebrated that endorsement. Ed Cruz also got the endorsement of the co-director of Operation Rescue, which is a very hardline pro-life organization whose other co-founder went to prison for bombing an abortion clinic, I think in Florida, and who was one of the intellectual pillars behind the idea that you could use justifiable homicide as a defense for killing abortion doctors. In fact, she came out after, I think Sue Sullinger is her name, came out after George Tiller got killed by Scott Roeder and said that, and Scott Roeder tried to use that defense in Kansas for that murder, and the judge wouldn't let him take that to the jury. So he's courting and actively engaged with people that have been identified with some pretty out there views. My question is, why isn't he being jumped all over the way that Barack Obama was jumped all over for the Jeremiah Wright stuff? What's the difference?
Well, one, I think the main difference is you have an actual holy man who has shown a propensity to denigrate the United States every chance he's got.
He didn't say we should kill the United States.
Well, the bottom line is 20 years association on a personal level, and Ted Cruz. This is a political thing. I mean, people do have a tendency to separate personal from political. Now, the other sad fact of the matter is there are people that agree with the positions that the people you mentioned take. I'm not one of them. Either you value life or you don't. And you don't.
I'm not asking you to.
I'm not asking you. Execution.
I'm just going to jump in. I'm not asking you to speak for conservatives, although that's kind of what we do on this show.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not asking you to explain the thinking that Ted Cruz has, because obviously we both know why he's doing it. He's trying to consolidate that side of his voting bloc. But what my question is, it was very, very clear what the narrative was supposed to be about Barack Obama. He didn't fit that narrative, and he was effectively able to shake it off. Ted Cruz is not interested in shaking these guys off the way that Obama was with Jeremiah. The things that Jeremiah Wright came out, and he was gone. He was thrown under the bus. Obama gave that race speech, and Wright was out of the picture. That's not happening here. So what's going on here? Why do we seem more comfortable with this kind of thing than we were with the other?
Well, the truth of the matter is, I don't think we are more comfortable with it. I do think that
Ted Cruz is comfortable. He's rising the polls. What does that mean?
There you go. Well, the thing is, part of the thing I think people are missing about politics is they're tired of people flip-flopping. That's part of what Trump does. Yeah, he speaks his mind, but really, when you challenge him, he goes, that's what I think. I'm not backing away. Carson is the same thing, right? I think Cruz is like, I'm pro-life, and I'm militantly pro-life, and this is where I come from. If you're trying to compare Jeremiah Wright and Ted Cruz people, I don't think there's a vitriol, because when this thing with as I remember, with Wright hit, I think a lot of it was driven by Hillary. She was trying to get back ahead of Obama. I have our page has a lot of liberal friends. There are people out there, really holding up exactly what you're saying. I just don't think it's getting traction in the mainstream media at this point, and I think at some point it will.
Yeah, well, I think he's gonna have to answer for it. I find this strain of conservatism coming from Ted Cruz to be just really, really different in tone.
Well, keep in mind
than others.
Sorry.
As evidence of that, he last night, and this took over my Facebook wall and sent me down a stupid rabbit hole. I'm embarrassed to admit that I went in deep into this last night around 9:00 because it wasn't the thing that he said. He came out on a interview with Hugh Hewitt, who all you folks should know. We'll maybe get into this next break, and said that if you look at statistics, that most violent criminals are Democrats. Most violent felons are Democrats. Citing a study from these two Harvard poli-sci professors that, or one was from Penn, one was from Harvard, that said that a lot of folks, when they get their voting rights back after they've been convicted of felonies, register as Democrats. We'll talk maybe more about that after the break. But it wasn't that so much that he would, because of course he's going to say something like that, but that it's immediately absorbed, processed, agreed with, and then advocated for by folks on the right. I think that's different. I think that's a different thing that we're seeing from him specifically, and we'll maybe talk about that after the break.
We're going to continue to talk about Ted Cruz and presidential candidacy. We're going to talk about if it's a mistake to go to the left, or to the right. It's always a mistake to go to the left. I'm just letting you know. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back right after this break.